When using the FX6 camera, there are a few things that are needed to be kept in mind in order to keep your video quality up. Not taking these into account can have big impacts on your final product. But before we get into that, there are some important things to talk about for any shoot in general, health and safety. When doing a shoot, you have to make sure that the ground is clear of any hazards that can cause slips and trips. Things like bags on the ground, chairs pulled out, wires, or cables that are strung along the ground, and so on. Then there are electrical hazards. When using any lights that aren't LED, such as tungsten bulbs, lights, it's important to make sure that they don't get too hot. If they get too warm, the lights are at risk of becoming damaged or becoming a hazard to the crew, risking damage to the bulbs themselves, burning the crew, or setting fire to any nearby fabrics that are too close to the lights. Now, when actually starting up on a shoot, one of the first things you have to do is setting up your lighting. If shooting indoors or in a dark location, lighting is one of the first things you'll have to set up, unless outdoors with natural lighting. Setting up lighting differs depending on the type of shoot as well. When doing a static shot of your subject, talking in scenarios like interviews or explanatory videos, for example, you would normally have your lighting set up to clearly light up the subject and the background to reduce the chances of background shadows. Though, in some cases, encouraging shadows on one side of your subject can add even more depth and make things more visually interesting for the viewer than having a flat, even lighting. When it comes to the use of equipment, you need to start with setting up the camera and the other equipment. Starting with the tripod, you then install the battery and SD card into your camera. Check that the battery is full and attach the slate to the mount of the camera. Onto the tripod. When it comes to camera movement, two of the most common ones other than static shots, you'll be using pan and tilt or maneuverability, or both within one shot. The first set of settings is the FPS. When doing any shoots inside, it is important to have the FPS at a number that doesn't catch the flickering of the lights when inside, or if there are any devices that could be in frame. For the UK, the FPS to achieve this is 25 frames per second. The FPS is often needed to be balanced between not being too slow and not too fast. Having the footage FPS be too slow can cause the video to look choppy and desynced when people are talking. Having it too high, though, can risk any in-frame lights flickering in the foreground, making 25 a good mid-zone for the shoots. Once you have the FPS set, you need to set the shutter speed. The shutter speed is usually twice the FPS, the reason being to balance the motion blur, exposure, and avoid choppy movement. Having the shutter speed too low can cause lots of motion blur and overexposure, making it hard to see what's going on. Though sometimes motion blur can be added intentionally, in contrast, having your shutter speed too high can make the motion underexposed in the footage. Then there is the ISO. The ISO is the setting that controls the amount of power going through the camera sensor. High power means more light is being caught, but too high can cause the white pixels to get added due to the sensor being overwhelmed, lowering the quality of the video. This setting is best to be changed once the other settings are adjusted. Then there's the focus and zoom on the camera. When refocusing on your subject, you have the options between manual and automatic focus. Both have their benefits and downfalls. The best time to use automatic focus is in shots where you are moving due to movement like pan, tilt, tracking, or use of the crane and dolly. When moving, having an automatic focus is useful to make sure your subject is consistently in focus when on the move. But when taking static shots, such as doing an interview or showing of a scene, it's best to use manual focus. When shooting an interview, there's a chance the interviewee could move or shift, which could cause the automatic focus to move too much, ruining the scene. Keeping the focus on manual means it'll stay stable when the subject adjusts themselves. In some static shots, manual focus is also needed for artistic and stylistic shots, sometimes doing to emphasize the subject or add more to the shot's mood. Then there is the f-stop. The f-stop or aperture is the setting mechanism that controls the opening in the camera lens. Adjusting this can help give the operator greater control over the amount of physical light hitting the sensor. Using this can give better exposure of your shot when lighting up the scene. One of the best tools for the FX6 when trying to measure the lighting is the S-log. The S-log is a measuring tool used to make sure that you have nicely lit and exposed footage for your final piece. When using the S-log, you normally have the white curve representing your light levels between the two red lines or in the red box, as this is often the most optimal levels to keep them in for nicely exposed footage. The curve is best when almost touching the top line. We will now talk about the ND filter. The ND filter is often used to help even out and soften light when the footage is overexposed for outdoor shoots. This helps to maintain the colors in your footage and keep the footage bright, as relying on the other settings alone can possibly affect the colors and general video quality.